Germany's government coalition collapsed the day Donald Trump was announced winner of the US elections. Now Germans will have to decide who will rule the country in a snap election in February. Until then, little else will get done. Olaf Scholz has become a lame duck chancellor at a time when Germany needs strong political leadership more than ever. The economy is struggling, society is divided. Europe's heavyweight has come to a halt, including in foreign policy. That's especially bitter for Ukraine. While its two biggest supporters, the US and Germany, are stuck in a power vacuum, its war against Russia continues to escalate. And to the point we ask Germany's downfall. Can a new government turn things around? Welcome to this week's To The Point. I'm Javier Arguedas. It's good to have you with us. Let's meet today's guests. Michaela Küfner is DW's chief political editor here in Berlin. Felix Lee is a geoeconomics editor at Germany's Süddeutsche Zeitung Dossier. And Melinda Crane is a journalist, moderator, and political analyst specialized in the US. And of course, anyone who paid attention will have recognized Melinda as a familiar face here on To The Point, as a longtime host of this show. It's so good to have you with us. Now on the other side of this table, welcome home. Well, crazy times here in Germany. It's really a special and new particular situation, as a few years ago, Germany was still a beacon of stability and economic power here in Europe. Now, pretty much every sector of this country is in crisis. Michaela, I'd like to start with you. How did we get here?
Well, first of all, there was a war started by Russia against Ukraine, and that through the incoming government, which followed Angela Merkel's long-time chancellorship, pretty much off balance. A huge challenge. The Zeitenwende was declared. It was supposed to bring a different focus on public spending. And now we see a government that is broken up. The first long-term three-way coalition proves to be an experiment that simply didn't work out. That's the very short version of it. It's as much drama as you're probably going to see in Germany on the political scene, and it comes at a very, very crucial time with that ongoing war going into its third year. The economy facing huge challenges, the auto industry, German cars simply aren't selling anymore. And if you, there's a German saying that if the German car industry gets the sniffles, then the German economy is going to have a cold. And that's what we're heading into. No clear concept by the outgoing government, and a period now of uncertainty, despite the fact that Germany is on paper and legally able to act, but we're not going to see any kind of big concept, any roadmap out of this economic situation, but also out of the political challenges of the coming months.
You mentioned many of the crucial aspects here, Felix. It is said that economic policy was pretty much the main culprit for the reason this coalition ultimately collapsed. Why was the government unable to find common ground here?
Well, let me emphasize first, Germany is still the third largest economy in the world. But as you're totally right. We're in a deep crisis. And one of the reasons is, or maybe not the reason, but one thing which has to be changed is that the government failed, and not only this government, but also the previous governments, they failed to invest enough, not only in infrastructure, Germany's infrastructure is in a disastrous condition, but also in future technologies. And that's what's missing now. And I'm not sure if the recent government, if it was fully clear how Germany is lacking behind in comparison to the US, in comparison to a lot of East Asian countries, even in comparison to some European countries, and that this government has failed now or has collapsed now is also, I think, a big political disaster, because there are huge steps which has to be taken in the next few weeks because of Trump got elected in the US. And this is, I'm afraid, this is not going to happen.
But do you think that was the main reason, the fact that they didn't read the necessity of these economic reforms?
I think it was one of the big reasons because in Germany we talk about the debt brake, which is a huge hurdle, or even the future government is not, until we still hold on to this debt brake, even a future government will not be able to take big actions which are needed. And I'm afraid, because if we have the coming election, that this debt brake cannot be changed anymore, because it needs, for this to be changed, there will be needed a two-thirds majority in the Bundestag, in the German parliament. And I'm a little bit afraid, or not only a little bit, but I'm hugely afraid that after the next election, there will be no two-thirds majority within the democratic parties, but AfD, right populist party in Germany, and another populist party will have enough seats in the parliament to blockade all this.
Yeah. You seem to share.
I actually just wanted to add that you described the long-term problem, which was lack of crucial investment and the role of the debt brake in that. And the debt brake is basically a cap that essentially prevents Germany from doing deficit spending. But the shorter-term problem was that for the past year, the German government has had a huge hole in its budget due to a Supreme Court decision that essentially prevented the government from employing a kind of a trick in order to get adequate money to fund its budget. And that trick was to borrow money from a corona fund, a fund that had been set up for the effects of the pandemic, and essentially transfer that into other budgetary areas. The Supreme Court put a stop to that, and since then, the government has been in crisis about essentially how to just fund its ongoing budget. And in fact, this government crisis came right before the budgetary debate in Parliament. That's no coincidence. But the problem is Germany now doesn't have a budget. And that is absolutely crucial, obviously, for a government to run. It needs to be able to allocate spending. So that is an element of chaos that one could scarcely have imagined in a country like this one. And it shows how dire the inability of the coalition was to agree upon compromises. There were essentially conflicting schools of thought about how to fund very crucial activities.
And all of that has been... Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to add to that. There won't be a government shutdown, though, because in Germany, the government can still, the state can still take over. But the 15th of November 2023, when that budget was blown out of the water by the Constitutional Court, that was the beginning of the end of this coalition, because the money in there, those 60 billion that were missing, that was the glue that was holding this three-way coalition together. And now they don't have funds to look into the future. There was a lot of debate about the past. There's a lot of distrust over pet projects not being able to be put into, be implemented. And Olaf Scholz criticised as lacking the leadership to hold his whole coalition together, which has brought Germany to the point where he now lacks the authority to hold Europe together as Trump comes into power.
They essentially didn't have a plan B. Germany is not only a political mess, we just heard it, the economy is also struggling. The country is in a recession. Empty order books, no growth, few investments, job cuts, and now even factory closures. A drastic downward spiral few had seen coming.
The engine of the German economy, the automobile industry, has stalled. VW is planning to close entire plants and threatening mass layoffs. For the longest time, jobs at VW were considered absolutely safe. People are feeling very insecure. This puts their future in question. No one knows what will happen. These are drastic cutbacks, and people are afraid. They are worried about providing for their families. Other big car makers like Audi and BMW are also facing problems, and numerous suppliers have filed for bankruptcy. Empty lots instead of new factories. Business investment in Germany has also taken a serious hit. The amount of direct foreign investment fell by 12% last year. High energy costs, dilapidated infrastructure, and bureaucracy are deterring investors. The latest economic data confirms the German economy is still limping along. experts expect final figures for 2024 to show minimal growth. Will Germany slip into permanent economic decline?
Felix, what needs to change in Germany in order to avoid a full-on economic crisis?
Well, first of all, we need to invest in our infrastructure, which is in a terrible stadium. Second, we have to invest in future technology, and it's not combustion engine. This is not a future technology, but in real needed future technology as semiconductors, as batteries, and the whole digitalization. And third off, and for this, what's needed from the government side, we need to get rid or have a huge reform on that brake in order to be able to take these actions.
The question now, of course, is who can bring about that change, Michaela? At this point, pretty much every single established German political party can be partially blamed for the situation we're in now.
Yes, but the question is, does Germany want to do something very German and keep talking about who's to blame, or does it really want to get moving into the future? And the problem was not that there weren't any concepts. The problem of this coalition was that it wasn't able to compromise and that there were competing concepts on the table. And the one by Robert Habeck, the trade minister, was basically 10% on every investment, no matter what it is. Then set against that was the now ex-finance minister's concept, which saw huge tax breaks. And that wasn't palatable with the Greens or the Social Democrats, but it was no longer about content. It was about who really can show the most profile, and everybody was clearly already in election gear, in campaigning gear. So, yes, if there is a concept and a clear direction, that's also what I'm hearing from German industry, Germany can regain its strength. It's still the third largest economy in the world. It still has a manufacturing industry that is highly competitive in parts, particularly in machine building. They're very popular around the world. But where are those future jobs going to come from? And it would have been, at the minimum, Germany could have done something like a copy-paste job of the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, which has clear tax breaks according to which industry is most future-proof and most desirable also in terms of green energy. So that is something that these elections will bring about, the impetus of actually having a clearer concept. But then again, we don't know what the outcome of that election will be. If once again has to be a three-way coalition, this will cost time. And that, at the moment, is actually the biggest problem, that there is more months of uncertainty still to come, which is stopping consumers from spending money and investors from investing in it.
And there's, of course, another very big factor in that equation, that is the election of Donald Trump. Melinda, experts warn the next administration in the U.S. will bring even more challenges to Germany. What is to expect from that second Trump presidency for the German economy?
Well, one of those challenges is the fact that, in fact, Donald Trump, during his election campaign and during his first term, has often set his sights on Germany. Donald Trump just hates a trade surplus. He wants the U.S. to be the preeminent export power. It is far from that. The U.S. runs a very high trade deficit. And he looks at Germany and sees the mirror image of that. He sees this trade surplus that Germany has been running pretty much forever, and it makes him angry. And therefore, during his campaign, he said in Georgia, one of the swing states, he said that German car companies export far too many cars to the U.S. The German car companies, under my next term, they will become American car companies. The irony is that American car companies produced 900,000 cars in the U.S. last year. They already are, thanks partly to the Inflation Reduction Act, but even before that. During his first term, one of the first things that Angela Merkel did was travel to the U.S. with a bunch of German CEOs, and they tried to make Donald Trump understand that they were already producing cars in the U.S. and that those cars are even being exported. That's good for the U.S. trade. But he somehow doesn't get it, and he has, as I said, set his sights on Germany. So certainly Germany can expect, but basically all exporters to the U.S. market can expect a blanket tariff of 10 to 20%. And renowned German economic institutes have said that the damage from that for German industry as a whole will be between 127 billion and 180 billion euros over the next 4 years. That's a lot of money for an economy that's already struggling.
But of course, his biggest threat is China, the biggest exporter, where the US has the biggest trade deficit with. But even this, and I mean, he wants to implement tariffs on Chinese products 60 to 80%. But even also this will have a huge impact on German economy, because where is all these overproduction and all these goods China was producing going when not to the biggest economy? Then they will try to find holes or ways to come to Europe,
and they will be cheaper.
And they will be flooding the Chinese.
Can Germany counter those phenomena with political or economic reforms?
Well, not at the moment. I mean, not with this government. I still have hope in the EU Commission. Trade policy, thanks God, in this situation, trade policy is done by the EU Commission, but it's going to be very hard. And for this, I mean, what is the EU Commission? They need to have the vetoes from all the big economies in Europe. And if Germany is not in it, or because it's not capable at the moment, then this is also going to create huge problems.
Huge problems that are not only related to the economy, they're also related to safety. Donald Trump's victory in the U.S. elections and the collapse of the German government are times that are becoming even more difficult and unpredictable for Ukraine. Will weapons and ammunition continue to be supplied from the U.S. and Europe and in sufficient quantities? Only one thing is certain at the moment. The war with Russia is escalating and Ukrainian troops are being pushed back further.
With air raid sirens blaring throughout the country, fierce fighting on its eastern and southern fronts, and Russia preparing for a major attack, Ukraine needs Western aid more than ever. But Germany is without a functioning government, due in part to disputes over the scope of aid for Ukraine. For now, Ukraine's President Zelensky cannot count on Berlin making major decisions about financial aid or arms deliveries. Meanwhile, the U.S. is caught in its own political vacuum. President-elect Donald Trump has announced he will quickly end the war in Ukraine, but at whose expense? He is questioning the need for NATO, saying the U.S. might leave the alliance. How or whether the U.S. will support Ukraine in the future is completely unclear. And in Europe, the much-touted Franco-German alliance is paralyzed. Other leaders, such as Hungary's Viktor Orban, a Russia-friendly populist, are setting the tone. Conflict and stalemate. They could benefit one person above all, Russian President Vladimir Putin. Just how dangerous is this for Ukraine and Europe?
Michaela, parts of the German political spectrum don't support further weapons deliveries to Ukraine, or at least not in the way it's being done now, stating that strong military support would not put an end or mean an end of the war. How likely is it that Germany will continue to provide Ukraine much-needed military aid?
Germany will continue to provide that aid. If anything, the very likely new Chancellor, Friedrich Merz from the conservative CDU-CSU, is more in favor of sending more weapons. He came out in the past saying he would also be in favor of supplying the Taurus long-range missile system, which is kind of the hallmark policy of Olaf Scholz, that he refuses to hand that over to Ukraine out of fear that it would provoke Russia. Although he won't automatically give the green light for this system if he becomes Chancellor. We're getting different signals now because he too has an election campaign coming up. And it's true. And we're seeing in the polls that people are still in favor of supporting Ukraine in the majority, but becoming less and less keen on having those Germans' weapons deliveries continue at the current level. And this is an issue, it's actually the only issue where Olaf Scholz is scoring in the polls right now, going into an election campaign. So these supplies will continue, but can Germany provide the kind of support that the US has in the past? And the very short and honest answer is no way, because it's also no longer a question of money. It's a question of capacity to produce enough ammunition and weapons in time for Ukraine to be able to defend itself and particularly to push back Russia to the point where at some point, potentially, Donald Trump will try and knock heads together, whichever way he wants to fulfill his promise that he will end that war.
Yeah. And we now know that the Republicans will also have the control of the House of Representatives in the US, which means an unhindered Donald Trump, who has touted himself as the anti-war president. Belinda, what do you expect from the handling of the Ukraine war from this new administration?
Donald Trump has said he could end the Ukraine war in 24 hours. He clearly intends to try to compel both sides to go to the negotiating table. And apparently his idea is that he would threaten Zelensky to cut off support, military weapons, but also potentially the information that the U.S. security services provide to Ukraine if that were cut off. And perhaps it's no accident that Elon Musk was on that call with Zelensky, because Elon Musk provides Starlink, which is the basis for the Ukrainian internet. So that's the one side. And then apparently he wants to threaten to Putin that he would step up arms deliveries if Putin doesn't go to the table. But once they were at the table, what's going to happen? Most likely, Ukraine would come under huge pressure to renounce territories already occupied by Russia and also to renounce any membership in NATO for the foreseeable future. The problem is, we right now have the Russians, and by the way, also Israel in the Middle East, trying to establish facts on the ground quickly during the lame duck period. We have a double lame duck. We have Olaf Scholz as a lame duck, but of course, Joe Biden in many ways is also a lame duck. And that is a problem because what happens now in Ukraine will certainly affect the terms upon which any negotiations could be carried out. Therefore, the fact that Europe is not in a position to fill any gap from the U.S. is problematic for Ukraine.
And we also know that this time is money and that the production of weaponry is impossible to fulfill in a short amount of time. Let's say the U.S. does somehow stop delivering arms or reduces the arms deliveries to Ukraine. How long would it take for Europe to even be able to continue to provide support from an industrial perspective?
Well, that's a difficult question. It will definitely, Europe will not keep up until for this winter, for sure. The good news is Biden is still in power until January, and the money or the arms he promised to Ukraine is at the moment is still delivered. We don't know what's happening after January, but Europe will, by no chances, will be able to keep up. But of course, we have to start because, I mean, the conflict with Russia will not stop with the Ukrainian war. It will continue.
May I just say, Trump did say that he thinks Vladimir Putin has no intention whatsoever to go beyond Ukraine. But many here in Europe disagree with that assessment.
Exactly, but no one has correctly predicted Vladimir Putin's behavior in any case so far.
Or Trump's, for that matter.
Or Trump's, for that matter.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's also a big problem. Michaela, do you see any type of diplomatic shift in Germany's stance on the Ukraine war, apart from the economic aspects?
I think that commitment stands, that Germany will continue to support Ukraine, but it's really very fast going to become a question of feasibility if the debt brake remains in place and the incoming German government finds itself in a position where it's unable to secure more funds out of the budget without cutting into Germany's other social spending, for instance. And that's the very question where Olaf Scholz said that's why the coalition broke up, although there's two sides of the story, that he didn't want to cut down on social spending, which he sees as the key factor for cohesion here in Germany and for continuing to have that support to be able to help Ukraine. So I don't expect a major foreign policy shift. I do expect a lot more clarity through fresh elections. And I think that is what Germany and Europe needs most at this point in time.
Reading the German society, Melinda, as we slowly come to an end, do you think Germans are truly aware of how difficult the time ahead will be, considering that the uncertainty will stay there, the international conflicts will stay there, and one of the most important allies is uncertain.
I think that many Germans are very demoralized at the moment. During my discussions with people in business, but also with citizens, I'm hearing a lot of soul-searching and frustration. The fact that this coalition exploded when it did and the way it did is very disturbing for people. This is a country that likes stability, and they're not getting that right now from their politicians.
Many hope it will be regained someday. Thank you so much to all three of you for this discussion, and to you for watching. We'll definitely see you in our next show. Until then, remember that you can always watch our shows on YouTube. Just search for DW News and look for the latest To The Point episode. I'm Felix Lee. Till next time, take care and goodbye.